10 absurdly dangerous fights done with nothing to lose attitude. Many sports are risky, but when it comes to fighting and especially the UFC, things just get to another level of being nasty. And guess what, in this video, we're going to take a look at the 10 absurdly dangerous fights done with the attitude of nothing to lose. So let's begin. But before that, take a moment to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to stay tuned. Number 10. Gegard Mousasi vs Ilir Latifi. Gegard Mousasi, one of the most appreciated and famous athletes in sports, has many titles and accomplishments under his belt, which enabled him to make his return to the UFC a good news to the fans. And when this man returned to UFC, he was given a match with the number 2 ranked light heavyweight champion Alexander Gustafsson, who was then on a 6-fight win streak. This was a great show to put up considering that the winner would go on to battle Jon Jones. However, to everyone's dismay, Alex had to pull out. His teammate Latifi was there to save the card, and that's what he did. This was a risky match, but fortunately, Gegard ended up dominating all 3 rounds and decided to switch weight classes, whereas Gustafsson got a free pass to the next fight. Number 9. Jon Jones vs Shogun Rua. With an exceptional start to the UFC, Jon Jones started greatly by setting up an exceptional 7-win streak by the end of his first year. By 2011, he was fighting another UFC fighter who had been moving with a good timeline too. But Jon even battled him out, just to be greeted with a crazy update. He was offered a title fight with Shogun Rua on a short notice, and guess what? He admitted that it was a crazily risky fight, but still, he accepted it. Moreover, he easily won the fight by dominating the legend and did well to earn himself a big name as a solid athlete. But guess what? Accepting a title matchup in a post-match interview isn't a piece of cake. It is some serious risky stuff that can get challenging too. But Jones did it with belief and cleaned up easily. Number 8. Wanderlei Silva Pride Heavyweight Grand Prix. Wanderlei Silva is a man who needs no introduction. Being the scariest man in the MMA, he has had many wins and titles under his belt, making him one of the most promising athletes in the world. After successfully defending his title against the man who had once beaten him, everyone expected him to sit down calm, but what he did was shocking. He decided to enter the 2006 Heavyweight Grand Prix to challenge himself, which, as a champion, he did great, as he was the first fighter to have ever TKO'd Vegeta. However, when he competed against Mirko, he risked pretty much all his status, and that's when things got riskier and bad, when he was battled out by Mirko. Number 7. Daniel Cormier vs Anderson Silva. Being an undefeated heavyweight fighter, Cormier was Jon Jones' worst enemy too, when he got to 205 and was brutalized by Jon at UFC 182. Later, after some turn of events, DC became the champion and was later scheduled to face Jon Jones at UFC 200. But 3 days before the fight, Jon was flagged by USADA and had to be removed, which left DC's opponent's position vacant. But guess what? 2 days before the fight, Anderson Silva stepped up to fight, and unfortunately, DC was booed all through the fight. And this was a risky bout for DC considering his opponent, but he took it. Number 6. Michael Bisping vs Kevin Gastelum. After 24 fights in the UFC, Bisping finally KO'd Luke Rockhold to win the World Championship title. However, later he lost the title to St. George Pierre. While people expected his career to be at the brink of an end, considering his worsening eye condition too, a sudden change of plans came into play as Anderson Silva failed the USADA test before his match with Kevin, and Michael volunteered for that match. That's some serious risk. With a notice of 3 weeks, Michael was all set for the fight. However, this was a career-ending fight because he was battered in 2.5 minutes into the fight and had to retire due to his worsening eye. Number 5. Peter Yan vs Sean O'Malley. This matchup revealed how greatly Sean was taking a step up in his game to challenge a more competitive opponent in the division. For Yan, it's nothing more than just a risky match. That's because he has directly moved from fighting for the belt to fighting the number 13 guy in the division. This is quite startling considering why would he expect such a match given if he loses. This defeat will surely be the last nail in the coffin, and things will simply get worse for him. Himself, Yan believes that for a number 5 fighter fighting a number 13, one has to risk his reputation and everything. And if you think this is not risky, then dude, I have no words for you. Number 4. Conor McGregor vs Chad Mendes. To promote Conor's fight against Jose Aldo, Dana White simply went to great lengths as the UFC did their best to go around the world, including places such as London, Dublin, Boston, Rio de Janeiro, and many more, just for the sake to promote this showdown. This simply transformed this match into the most anticipated match in UFC history, and there is no question why. But here's the turning point. Aldo got injured as he bruised a rib and had to withdraw from the match. The biggest fight in the MMA history did not happen as planned. However, Conor said he was ready to fight anyone by this time. And when the opponent was finally chosen, it was Chad, which further made this match more exciting considering that he is a wrestler and that this would be a big game for Conor. Now that was some risky business for Conor McGregor, but he walked out victorious that night by TKOing Chad in the second round. Number 3, Reinier de Ridder vs Aung Lan Song 2. De Ridder is one of those MMA guys who has had a tremendous record in his fighting career with many serious wins and titles under his belt. Moreover, the Dutch fighter was also coming with a 16-0 winning streak at that time. He became the middleweight champion by defeating Aung La. After losing to de Ridder, Aung La went on to lightweight to defend his title against Vitali, who at the nick of time tested COVID positive and had to back out. And guess what? De Ridder came into the story once again and agreed to fight Aung La again on a 6-day notice. Although there was no reason for de Ridder to put himself at such a risk and agree to a fight on such short notice. But by the time the fight ended, he was both the middleweight and the lightweight champion too. Number 2, Tony Ferguson vs Justin Gaethje. Tony was set to fight Khabib for the title match, which was pretty exciting. However, COVID outbreak imposed certain restrictions which prevented Khabib from leaving Russia, and rather than cancelling the showdown, Tony was offered to fight against the top contender Justin. With a 12-win streak, Tony was in every way deserving of his match with Khabib, but 11 days before the showdown, things changed. This was seriously a risk for Tony. He was on a 12-win streak and was the #1 contender, but guess what? The fight ended differently, as Justin outplayed him in every way possible and walked out victorious. Although this fight surely was damaging for Tony, as he lost his entire reputation coming off as undefeated. He did his best to keep the UFC event alive, and guess what? He did great. Number 1, Francis Ngannou vs Cyril Gane. Fighting his last fight of the contract, Francis had to move to Cameroon before the fight. However, somehow some turn of events came about and Francis was all scheduled to come face-to-face with Cyril. Being his last fight, he didn't want to lose as it could have resulted in him being removed from the UFC entirely. Additionally, he was suffering an MCL injury due to which his coach insisted to not fight. However, he didn't retreat, which was severely risky for Francis. However, Francis took the challenge to prove to the world that he was the real champion, and he ended up winning the fight. It was a job well done, but with some hell of a risk. So, these risky fights were scheduled in the most unprecedented ways, and no one had ever expected these, but guess what? UFC has some great fights under its belt now. Before leaving, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell icon to stay tuned. Share your thoughts about which fight was the riskiest in the comments below. See you next time.